welcome back from that break, and you're still listening to the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. I have the pleasure of being joined by James of the Cricket Badger Podcast. James has been on the show many times before. He's a friend of the show. James, welcome back to Edges and Sledges.
Always a pleasure. Always good to see you. We're basically our two podcasts. We've been around a while, haven't we? Our two podcasts. There's been some people come and gone during lockdowns and various things, but generally speaking, we've been there all the way through. But always good to see you, DJ.
Yeah, and the last time we spoke was during the World Cup, just after India had played England. But India seem to play England quite a lot these days.
Yes.
And we're back again playing a 5-match test series for the first time. And so it's great to have you on the show. The idea would be to preview the England side, because we would have done the India side already. But before we get into that, James, tell us a little bit about the Cricket Badger podcast.
Yeah, well, if you put Cricket Badger Podcast into Google, you'll find me. All the various platforms that you can listen to podcasts on. And you can follow me on Twitter at cricket_badger.
James, I'm going to ask you a question which I should have probably asked you a long time ago. For our listeners that aren't familiar with terminology, what is a cricket badger?
A cricket badger, it's almost an insult, really, using cricket dressing rooms where, the Australians call people cricket nuffies. It's like a cricket tragic, somebody that basically lives and breathes the sport, probably too much, wants to know everything about it. You get certain people in cricket that once they take their whites off or whatever and they go home, they forget about cricket. Other people go home and pore over the stats. And a cricket badger is somebody that pores over the stats, basically, and loves the game.
So cricket nerd is what we would call you.
That's the kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you've been around for how many episodes have you now got in the bag?
Oh, blimey. 550 something, I think, something like that. Is we're going to be going big on the series coming up. I mean, I have different kinds of episodes. I have kind of guests on that have been involved in cricket that I interview. And then during big series or World Cups or something, we do regular podcasts with what I call my fan badges. I've got fans that represent India, fans that represent England, and we'll be getting their immediate reactions after the day's play.
Fantastic. Now that you've mentioned it, we should get into the cricket. James, I'm going to ask you the hardest questions first, right? Obviously, we've heard about Harry Brook not being there at the start of the tour, which we'll come to, and we'll talk about possible combinations for England and things like that. But even before the series has started, there's been talk about pitches by Ollie Pope, right? Are Indian pitches already in English players' heads?
I think, just to kind of try and sidestep that question a little bit, but I'm going to answer it. I think this is the toughest tour that England have. I think...
any team has. Any team
absolutely.
has. They've lost three test matches in a decade, right?
India's home record is awesome. The pitches over there are different to anything that England batters face, generally speaking. And it's a tough tour, and there's a reason why the last England team that won a test series there was a very, very good side, because they had to be to win in India. We saw on the last tour, Joe Root's double 100 in Ahmedabad in the first test match was... got people crowing a little bit, and after that it was India procession towards the series win. So it's always going to be a tough tour. Obviously Bazball's kind of in the equation, as you mentioned, pitches. I think any England player going to India is going to be concerned about the pitches, because it is a fear of the unknown. Or certainly spinning tracks potentially, which England aren't particularly great on. And haven't been in the past. So the pitches will be spoken about a lot, I think. I mean, we talked about it a lot in the last series, DJ, because the pitches as the series progressed, I think India got a bit of a bloody nose in that first test and then gave some pretty turny tracks from almost ball one and in the kind of ensuing test matches. And their spinners are great. And obviously they did very well on them. But... what I don't like, there's a lot of talk on social media, you'll have seen it as well. As soon as there is a 2-day test match on a green top, all of the Indian fans say, well, why aren't you talking about that one? And then when the ball goes through the surface on the first day in a test in India, the rest of the world goes, well, look at your pitches, they're terrible. I just think there's a standard of test cricket where I don't care if it spins, I don't care if it seams, I don't care if it bounces nicely. But I think if it starts to go through the surface on day one, that pitch isn't particularly test ready.
And so you want to see Test cricket that goes into the fourth and the fifth day is
Well,
what I'm hearing.
there's 5 days for a reason, aren't there?
Yeah.
A test of a player Test cricket is called Test cricket because it's a test, and you test yourself against the very best players, in all sorts of different circumstances and in different conditions. And it's a test of your stamina, it's a test of your concentration, it's a test of your technique and your ability to go up against the best over a concerted period. It's not like a T10 where if you have a good 10 minutes, you've won the game. You need a bit more than 10 minutes to win a test match. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to go into day 5 or even day 4, but as long as it's a fairly even contest between bat and ball, and both sides, the person running in with the ball in hand, whether he's a spinner or a seamer, has a little bit of a chance. A batter, if he bats well, has a little bit of a chance. I think the pitches I don't like is when it's maybe too geared towards one. I don't like pitches in that we've seen, some of the pitches in Pakistan where it's been 600 plays 500. Are dreadful for Test cricket. There's no balls going through the top in any of those Test matches, but it's not great for Test cricket because it's just a procession of runs and the bowlers don't have much of a chance. Equally, I don't like it when the bowlers are too much on top and the batters don't really have a chance. There's got to be some kind of balance between the two, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, and there's a larger discussion to be had about the future of Test cricket with South Africa sending kind of second string teams to
Yeah.
New Zealand. With, the West Indies are sent 7 debutants, I think, to Australia. So I think there's a larger discussion over there. But what I'd put to you is,
having said that, DJ, just to cut in, India C beat Australia on their own surface a few years ago, didn't they? So
they did.
As long as you've got strength in depth, that's not always a bad thing, I don't think.
The Gabiversary was 2 days ago, actually, the 19th of Jan, which is Ashwin's birthday. So we'll never forget that day. But what I'd put to you is, some of this is probably driven by the World Test Championship and the desire for teams to win home Test matches and get to those finals. And India have done that the last 2 times off the back of a lot of home wins. And they're willing to take the occasional bloody nose, as you said, in Chennai, if it means that they can win the majority of Test matches at home. And they didn't lose Test matches for years. Forget series. They haven't lost a series since England beat India in 2012, I think, with the Cook, Panissa and Swan and KP, that team. But they're very good at playing on those surfaces as well, and that's where I think there's the feeling that it makes cricket more of a lottery, right? Those types of pitches, but India seem to come out on top a lot more, when it's weighted in favour of the bowlers and the spinners.
I think if I was in charge of the Indian cricket team, and England were coming in a few weeks' time, I would say to the curators of each ground, give me rank turners, please. They can't play spin bowling. Give me rank turners. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing to your strengths as a nation. I don't think England do that enough, to be honest. I think England, historically anyway, have always had very good seam attacks, and we very rarely play on pitches which seam much. They tend to... I think probably in England they're very conscious of trying to get the test to go 5 days, and therefore want the batters to be in charge for at least the first 3. But yeah, I've got nothing against any team playing to their strengths and playing to their, you grow up in those conditions, playing them. There's no problem with that at all. But I think there is a kind of a standard that you need to get to. And I saw a thing recently where I think India's had more poor ratings for cricket pitches than other teams. Possibly means they win on them, as you say, because they do seem to do well on those surfaces. But there's got to be a little bit of give and take here. But as I say, if I was an Indian selector, director, whatever, in charge of Indian cricket, I'd be saying, make it spin like mad against the England batters. I would.
Yeah, and there's also the aspect that the Indian seamers have done pretty well compared to visiting seamers. Of course, we all remember that Jimmy Anderson spell in the 21 series where in Chennai in the first test, which was great. But I think there was a stat I was reading somewhere that 1/3 of the wickets have actually been taken by the seamers, and they've outbowled their counterparts by about 17 or 18 runs per wicket, which is a big stat when it comes to so what I think what I'm saying is that we've been catering to spin, but let's not forget the seamers have bowled really well as well. The likes of Umesh, Ishant, Shami, Bumrah hasn't played a lot at home, but he averages 16 or something.
Mm.
And Siraj, in theory, should be quite a good bowler at home as well because he bowls straight at the stumps, gets on a roll. He's kind of a Stuart Broad-esque type of cricketer where once he gets on a roll, he's unstoppable,
Yeah.
right?
I think one of the big things that obviously Virat's not captain anymore, but I think one of the big things that happened to Indian cricket during his tenure as captain was that two things really, or maybe three things. He got belief. He set standards in that he got the team to believe they were good enough, which is a big thing in any sport. He got fitness levels up to a more than acceptable level, because I think that was a problem maybe historically with some Indian players. And he brought the seamers through, whether it was him or whether it was an Indian kind of initiative. But during his period, a lot of seamers were blooded, fast bowlers were blooded in the India team, and they are as good an attack as most now in world cricket. I think the Australians probably run them close, but in England, maybe a few years ago, we run them close. But you can't just see. I mean, possibly in the same way I was saying that Indian Supremos should kind of just put up ranked turners for England. There was always a thing, I think, with if India came to England, get some green tops. They can't play seam bowling, and we've got better seam bowlers. But probably that's not true anymore because the likes of Jasprit, Siraj is brilliant. I really like him. I like his attitude. He's kind of a little bit in your face, isn't he? And he, as you say, when he gets on a roll, he gets that bit between his teeth. He's great to watch. But the Indian seam bowlers are very, very strong now. So there aren't many weaknesses in that Indian side, and that's a problem for England going there because sometimes you kind of go to a place or you kind of host a nation and you think, well, at least if we're better in that department, if we can make sure our batters fire or our seamers fire, we're going to be in the ascendancy. There's not too many weaknesses to really prey upon in that Indian team.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about what's changed since the 21 tour. Of course, Virat is no longer captain.
Mm.
Rohit is now captain of the Test side. What do you make of the Indian team? Let's start with that, perhaps.
I love Rohit Sharma. I mean, as you know from our previous discussions, I'm a Mumbai Indians
Yeah,
fan.
Mumbai Indians fan.
In the IPL, Rohit's been absolutely superb for Mumbai Indians, lifting countless trophies, and I think he's got. I mean, he's a very different character, isn't he, Rohit to Virat? Because Virat, the cameras always went to Virat almost after every ball because there was always some kind of reaction. Spiky little fella, in the face of umpires at times, and didn't you never died kind of you could never be in any confusion as to whether he was happy or sad because you could see it on his face. Whereas Rohit's a lot more phlegmatic, isn't he? Very stable, very steady. I mean, he has got a little bit of fight in him as well, obviously, but I like him. I think he's a very level-headed kind of leader, and I think there's a kind of perception from outside of cricket teams that the captain does everything, all the players kind of like listen to his every word, and Virat will be very important in that dressing room still. Just because he's not captain anymore doesn't mean he's not a leader in that team. And there's a lot of experienced players in that Indian side. So Rohit's got a lot of right-hand men, or so to speak, to help him. If there's ever any kind of situation on an afternoon of a test where it's not quite going India's way, he's got a few heads to call upon there, hasn't he? But I think probably I think you've got a shelf life as a captain, and maybe Virat was getting tired by it. Everybody thinks when you're a kid you want to grow up and captain your country, but when you're actually doing it, there isn't much respite. And there's a lot of demands on somebody like Virat's time anyway. But as a captain, you have to do the press conferences, you have to do all the interviews prior to the series, you have to do the photo opportunities. It takes a lot of time out of the probably away from the nets or just out of having a rest here and there. So I think Virat will benefit from not being captain anymore. But like I say, he'll still be a leader alongside Rohit in that Indian side.
Yeah, and he didn't give up the Test captaincy willingly. He wanted to keep the ODI captaincy and the Test captaincy. But that's a different story
I
altogether.
don't think he'll do him any harm, though. I really don't.
No, he's back to his
Mm.
best
Yeah,
with the bat, which it seems he seems to be enjoying his time on the field as well. And we saw him in South Africa contributing
yeah,
in the second test. There wasn't that much of it in the first test, which was a little bit clueless from Rohit actually, because
yeah,
once Elgar got in and Janssen was in, Rohit seemed to run out of ideas. He wasn't helped by poor bowling, but
yeah.
you saw Kohli being much more involved in the in the second test match and in the heat of the, I mean, Rohit's going to have, I mean, surely he's going to play three spinners, right? And it's going to be Jadeja, Akshar, and and Ashwin, and Ashwin is 10 wickets away from 500 wickets, and
Well, I mean, Ashwin's amazing because how many times do you not play Ashwin? And there's no other side in the world would not play Ashwin. He's just an astounding cricketer. And I think sometimes other teams look at India's lineup and think, "Where's Ashwin? Why are you not
yeah,
playing Ashwin for?" Because, as I say, he'd walk into England's side. Any of
yeah,
those three spinners you've just mentioned would walk into England's side. To be fair, England have still got bruises and scars from Akshar Patel last time out. He just rocked up and rolled his arm over and basically seemed to get everybody out.
yeah.
And obviously, Jadeja's a class act, so it's going to be very, very tough for England. I mean, I've seen a few comments. Ben Duckett saying he's probably going to play the reverse sweep as a form of defence, and I understand what he's
Is
saying.
he spoken to Alex Carey?
I understand what he's saying because you need to have some out shots, or not out shots, but some get down the other end shots and rotate the strike and not just be and become the target of a spinner who can get then into rhythm. So you need to kind of rotate that strike and maybe the reverse sweep. They play the reverse sweep now as confidently as a defensive shot, but it's going to be very interesting because England have made a thing over the last or since McCullum's come in and Stokes took over the leadership of being aggressive, playing this baseball cricket, which isn't their phrase, but it's a phrase that's been
Yeah.
coined around it, of taking the positive option of being, trying to lead from the front and entertain and all this kind of stuff. I am scared. I have to say, as an England supporter and an English man, I am scared of what that might lead to. I've heard a few people in the team. Johnny Bairstow did an interview where he spoke a lot of sense, I think, of saying, there will be times where we can't do that. So I think it's going to be a watered down version of baseball. They can't just go gung ho against this India side in Indian conditions. It'll be just a recipe for disaster. It'll be 5-0 and it'll be over before you know it. So they're going to have to play with a little bit of common sense as well. And I mean, I think there's a misconception, I think, sometimes around this Bazball thing that it's all about hitting fours and sixes. It's not. It's about being positive in defence, having a mindset where you don't kind of take a backward step. If somebody's coming at you with the ball, you maybe just kind of defend a few, just kind of get yourself through the next 20 minutes and then try and then take it back to them. But it's not all about hitting sixes. And you can defend positively and you can be clever, can't you? And I think when Bazball's full on its face, it's when they haven't been clever, when they've got just carried away with it. I think if they employ this kind of Brendan McCullum ethos, and Ben Stokes is very key to it as well, of being aggressive and on the front foot, and they do it by engaging their brain rather than engaging their bravado, then that would be their best chance. But I have to say, I'm going to find it fascinating because whenever I've questioned Bazball in the last couple of years. I started off by saying, well, we've played 150 years of Test cricket plus, and nobody's ever done this before and got away with it. So how do you think you can? And then they started to win. And I think they played that first summer. They played a few teams. India came over for a one-off test, which was never going to be India's forte. You got to kind of bed yourself into a series. So I didn't think India were at their best in that week. We played a New Zealand side that weren't necessarily at their best either. I think a West Indies side too. But they got, I think, a few cheap wins, which is good. A win's a win. But I've been waiting for Bazball to kind of fall on its face, and it hasn't done yet. I fear for Bazball in India. If they need to engage brain, otherwise, if it's just about bravado, England are going to go down in flames. I think that's that. But then every time I've kind of said something similar in the past, they've come out and won. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time the end of baseball has been predicted, but it's a little bit like we'll see you in India, and if you can do that against. It was the Aussies that said, can you do it against us? nearly did it against them.
I mean, they did do. I mean, they went down 2-0, and the first two tests against the Aussies could have gone either way.
Yeah,
And the rest of the series, they continued to attack. There was that, I can't remember which test it was. It was the second test where England fell in a heap by just playing hook shots. It was really poor cricket by England that day. But instances of those sessions like that have been few and far between. Generally speaking, when they've attacked, it's come off. And I
yeah.
mean, just go back to kind of white ball cricket. When Owen Morgan took over the England white ball side, he kind of had the same kind of thought process. We're going to attack. We're going to attack. We're going to score 400. We don't care if you get 380. We'll score 400. There were a few times during that period where England fell flat on their face before winning the World Cup in 2019. But Owen Morgan's ethos was, I would prefer to be bowled out for 83, aiming to get 380, than creep to 180 and still lose. So it's, but I, I'm old enough to have seen a lot of Test cricket in India, and England going, and other teams going to India with a lot of bravado, a lot of talk, and a lot of chat. And then you don't hear much chat afterwards because they come home with a defeat. But so if this England team can go to India, play some kind of baseball, that of kind of an Indian version of baseball, and come home with some success, that would be incredible. Um, as a if you're asking me which team I'm going to bet on, it would be India.
Okay, so we've talked about baseball, which is more it's a philosophy, and it focuses on hitting runs with the bat. But the teams that have won in India, being England in 2012, had Monty and Swan.
Yeah.
Who are the Monty and Swan of this side? I mean, if
Well,
England had, tell me what's the blueprint for England to win this series? Because you're not going to India to just make up the numbers, right?
well,
If you're the team management, what is the blueprint you're setting out? Ben Stokes, what is he setting out for his team, saying this is how we're going to win this series? Because there's no point going there if you think, oh, let's see how it goes. What's the blueprint to win in India?
I mean, you asked who the Monty and Swan is. I mean, one of them is going to be Jack Leach. Jack Leach will play. He's the most experienced of England's spin bowlers. Got a very good record against in that part of the world. In the subcontinent, his record is very good because if India do serve up some turners, then he will be just as able to get some turners as the Indian spinners. And just before I go on to answer it, one of the things that I've always seen with India is there is this kind of you've already mentioned the fast bowler, so I know it's changed, but there is this kind of perception with India that they've got some brilliant spinners, and if you put a spinning track, they will win. I don't think the Indian batters necessarily play spin that well. So we saw Joe Root get 5 for 8 at Ahmedabad, didn't we, last time, wheeling away,
Yep.
taking loads of wickets. They played him atrociously. So I think if India's spinners can bowl well, as Monty and Graham Swan proved that season, you need some runs on the board to protect your spinners, though. That's where the kind of the downfall might come, because you can't just be bowled out for 180 and then expect your spinners to kind of rule the roost, because you need to be able to set fields that are appropriate to the spin. But um, India don't always play spin brilliantly. So there is that kind of maybe little bit of a glint of light there for the England spinners. But Jack Leach is going to be the premier spinner. He will play all 5 tests, and if he stays
And
fit.
Rishabh Pant isn't playing, so
Yeah,
it's good news for Jack.
yeah. I mean, just as an aside, it was great to see him back on the. He was
Yeah,
at one of the training sessions, wasn't he, the other day? I really
yeah,
like Rishabh Pant.
yeah.
I know he gets. He's a bit Marmite in Indian circles, isn't he? Sometimes because.
No, we're called the Rishabh Pant Show, James.
Yeah,
So you're
but
you're preaching to the choir.
he often gets blamed for things that when things go wrong. But it's just the way he plays, isn't it? And I just really like. He's just so refreshing. Got a big smile on his face, and I wish him every success. And in the future, I hope he gets fit
Yeah.
and he's playing again very very soon indeed. But so Jack Leach will be one of the spinners. They've taken Tom Hartley from Lancashire, 24 years old, another slow left armer. Um, I doubt they'll play both slow left armers, but we will see. You got Shoaib Bashir from Somerset, who is an off-break bowler who's only played really the smattering of first-class games for Somerset. Well thought of. If you look at his first-class record, it doesn't kind of make you think, wow, he's going to win this series for us. I doubt he'll play. I think he's probably going more for experience than anything else. And then you've got Rian Ahmed for England as well, who is in the team. He will play, I think, 'cause he bats as well. So he'll probably come in somewhere around about number 8 and get a few runs, hopefully, for him as well. His brother, by the way, is starring for England in the Under-19 World Cup at the moment. It's the Ahmed family has got two very, very talented youngsters. Whether this is a tour too early for Rian, because he's still only a kid, really. Very talented, precocious talent, bats and bowls, and takes wickets. But maybe, and he may have a moment or two in this series. Whether he can really string it together and be a consistent threat to India throughout the series is a different thing. But yeah, there is a potential for both Rian and I think it's Farhan, his brother, playing for the under-19s. They could be in tandem for England next time they visit India, and that you'll be lying awake sweating there, DJ, because those two when they actually reach their potential, India got no
Yeah.
chance.
Well, you haven't even seen Shami's brother bowl, Mohammad Kaif. Oh my God, he swings it even more than Mohammad Shami does. He's just taken 7 for Bengal, so right
Okay,
back
all
at
right,
the
you
England
win.
team. So, I mean, obviously you've spoken about when was the last time a leg spinner landed on Indian shores and did well?
True. I mean,
Um,
Shane Warne struggled in India, didn't he?
yeah, and Shane won't actually pick Rahan Ahmed as a guy who would play for India, and there's a great clip of him bowl. I think it's 13 or something, and
Yeah,
Shane once said, "Keep doing what you're doing,
yeah,
and you're going to play for." Or he basically keep an eye on this guy.
yeah,
What a call that is by the great man.
yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, Rian Ahmed is a real talent, and you ask
Yeah,
anybody at Leicestershire, they love him there. And like I say, he's only young. I mean, I would to be just a few years younger and be Rian
yeah,
Ahmed, and kind of just
yeah.
have his future because it's going to be a
Yeah.
bright one. But as I say,
And he can bat. You said
absolutely, yeah,
okay.
he can score runs too.
So
So
younger Adil Rashid that wants to play Test
he,
cricket.
he reminds me quite a bit of Adil Rashid
Okay.
in a way. Obviously, leg
Yeah.
spinner. I think Rash was a better batter.
Okay.
From what I've seen of Rian Ahmed, he comes in further down the order for Leicestershire and gets sort of lower order, not kind of middle order runs. Whereas when Rash was in his pomp for Yorkshire, he I think he got as high as number 3 in the order at one stage. Hardly ever see him bat anymore, but the kind of the was it 11 first class hundreds or whatever it is for Rash. Rian Ahmed's got maybe 1 or 2 so far.
Okay.
But you don't get a first class 100 unless you can hold a bat. So yeah, he's got huge potential, Rian Ahmed. Whether that is going to be seen, whether this is his real breakthrough series, remains to be seen over the next few weeks. But he's certainly one to watch out for, isn't it? Any Indian people watching this who are looking forward to the series, hopefully we'll see a lot of him because he's worth a look.
Yeah, awesome. So you've told me about 2 players that are likely to make the 11. Let's go through the England squad and let's have your playing 11 for the first couple of tests. Let's say.
Yeah, I think the batting is relatively easy, particularly now Harry Brooks withdrawn because any kind of controversy that's been on certainly on social media was should Ben Folkes play as the Premier keeper or should Johnny Bairstow play as a keeper batter? And Ben Folkes can certainly bat anyway, but obviously with Harry Brook going home, there's now room for probably both of them in the side. So you're not gonna separate the opening partnerships. The openers will be Zach Crawley and Ben Duckett. Zach Crawley got runs against Australia. I've always had my doubts about Zach Crawley. They've really persevered with him. I think too long. I think there was even in this part of his career, there was a case to send him back to Kent for a bit and then bring him back in again. But they believe in him and they will play him. And he is starting to get better. He's starting to show signs that he's learning. His technique has been tightened up a little bit. His job will
He's
be
quite tall, isn't he? So he'll be
yes,
good on the
yeah,
sweep and maybe using his feet. So
yeah.
that'll help him. But he's
I mean,
quite upright, which may work against him.
yeah, two very different openers there. Ben Duckett's more squat, and Zach Crawley much taller.
Which is almost a better place to be in India, where you need to get close to the ball and
Yeah.
keep it down. Whereas I think upright openers and Keaton Jennings has just scored 100 for
Yeah.
the England Lions. He
Played
got
really well
100
as well.
on
Yeah.
Yeah, he got 100 on a Chennai track, I think, on his debut. But ever since then, he really did struggle.
I
Okay, so we've
was
got the openers in
I was
place.
disappointed they didn't bring Keaton Jennings back in actually when they had the opening with Harry Brook going home. I hope Harry, whatever the reason is for Harry going home, hope he's going to get over that because he's a very talented player. It's a shame he's not going to be in India. So wish him well. Yeah. So
Yeah,
Crawley and Duckett to open. I mean, it seems to me that Ollie Pope's now back in. He will bat number 3 for England. He seems to have started anyway to nail down the number 3 position. You've got Joe Root then at 4. A big series for Joe Root. They always are. He's always England's best batter. Scored runs, obviously, in the last trip to India.
yeah.
If he has
And
a
his
bad,
revival started in that trip to India, didn't he,
yeah,
with the big double hundred, where he just started reeling hundred after hundred, and
yeah,
because
and
before that there was a question around his conversion rate, I guess, which
yeah,
he
there was
put
a
to
lot of
rest
chat
after
about
that.
50 to 100, but he then just
Yeah,
he's got about
just
15
went
million
nuts.
hundreds in a row, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, he's going to be very key to England for the rest of them to
And
back
how's
around
his
him.
back for bowling as well? Because he's a key. Is because if you've got two people taking the ball away from the bat,
Yeah,
you need someone to bring the ball back in or
yeah,
take it away from the lefties.
yeah. So Joe at 4. Ben Stokes will come in at 5. I only maybe 6 because he did drop to 6. It depends on whether he's going to be playing purely as a batter or whether he's playing as a all rounder. And in
Yeah,
recent times, he's played as a batter. I've not really heard anything about whether he's fit to bowl or not. Doesn't seem to be a lot of talk about whether he is or isn't. He would be. It would be massive for England if he could bowl, because he can make a difference. He can put in that like 8 over spell, take a two or three wickets, and just change an afternoon or whatever. If he's playing purely as a batter, he's good enough to play just as a batter, but it would slightly weaken England's chances. So he'll be
he
at
averages 32 in India, by the way.
yeah. So he'll be 5 or 6. Then you've got a combination of, I guess, Ben Folkes will certainly play.
Yep.
Maybe Rian Ahmed in the middle order as well. Something like that. It's the bowling that's going to be interesting because I think England will rotate the bowlers. It won't be just the same bowler.
Sorry, who's going to bat at 5? Have I missed that? Who's
I
going to
think
bat
If Stokes is
before
just playing
Stokes? Yeah.
purely as a batter, he'll bat at 5. And then
Okay.
you've got a combination of the likes of Rian Ahmed and Ben Folkes at
Is
6 and
it
7.
is that a bit short on batting? Do you need one more batter?
I mean, Dan Lawrence has been called up to cover Harry Brook, but I don't think Dan will play. So you've got, sorry, I've missed out Bairstow, haven't I? Bairstow will be 5,
Yeah.
Stokes will be 6.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
what I
you've
would have
got
thought.
Folkes and Rian Ahmed sort of 7 and 8. And then Jack Leach will certainly take up one of the bowling spots. I would imagine they'll rotate the pace bowlers. So you've got Jimmy Anderson, who's got a half decent record in the subcontinent. He doesn't always take loads of wickets, but he's always quite controlled and hard to get away. And we've seen on previous tours where he'll come on and end up with figures of like 20 overs, 1 for 30 or something like that, because he's just kind of short at one end and made it hard for the batting side. It's going to be interesting to see. They might just go Leach, Ahmed, and Root as the 3 spinners in the first test and see how it goes. I mean, it would, if they're going to play anybody else, it would mean giving them a test debut. I mean, obviously that can happen, but Shoaib Bashir and Tom Hartley, I think, might have to bide their time for a chance with the ball. Might have to rely on
So
injuries.
does that mean does that mean 3 quicks with Jimmy? Because you've got to 8 with Ryan, and then you add Jimmy to that,
Well,
so you've got
Rihanna's
9.
spinner, Jack Leach. I'm going to put Jack Leach at 9 purely for
Yeah.
ease,
Okay.
and then that leaves you with 2 quick bowlers to maybe support Ben
Okay.
Stokes if he can.
So
roll his
Jimmy,
arm over.
and of course there's no Broad anymore.
No Broad.
Who's the other quick?
In the squad, you've got, I mean, Ollie Robinson, and Ollie Robinson is he's a very, very good player. Ollie Robinson. Going to be interesting to see how he does in those conditions. But Ollie Robinson and Jimmy Anderson together will be decent. Behind them, you've got then Gus Atkinson, the Surrey bowler who played in the World Cup. And obviously Mark Wood as well for his pace. So a lot of that will depend on the surfaces. They'll have a look at the tracks, and if they can see maybe the potential for some pace, or they might think that they need a point of difference with somebody that can bowl at 94 miles an hour, which obviously Woody can. But I don't think Jimmy, Mark Wood, or Gus Atkinson will play all 5 tests. They will get a little bit rotated depending on the venues. And the interesting thing as well, DJ, is that the venues that have obviously been picked for this series aren't your classic India Tour venues, are
Yeah,
they?
yeah, yeah.
So there's a bit of unknown for England. I think they've obviously got some. Uh, some local info inside the camp, but I don't think they probably know too much about some of the surfaces out there. England maybe got criticised in the recent World Cup for being a little bit too stats based, but they might have to be with some of these surfaces because they'll have to look at what's happened there in the past and who's done well there in the past before they pick their side. Take a look at the surface and then pick the 11. But it's going to be interesting. And I mean, in previous tours or some previous tours of India, there's been a big rotation of team for England because they've lost, and then obviously the losing team tends to change, a winning team tends to stay the same. But it's going to be interesting. But I think the key players for England, as they tend to be, will be Joe Root with the bat, Ben Stokes with the bat, and hopefully a little bit with the ball. And on this tour anyway, Jack Leach with the spin. If Jack Leach has a good England need Root and Leach to have good series, otherwise they're going to get battered, I think.
Okay. It's a little bit of a shame that you haven't got the classic kind of Mumbai, Chennai, Calcutta type of test matches, but I think that's the way the BCCI works. It's had to give the local state associations some games. So you've got the likes of I think there's a test at Ranchi and there's one at Hyderabad. There's as you say, not traditional test match venues. Well, that's fine. I mean, it's a bit of an unknown for
Dharamshala's one that a lot of England supporters will want to go to.
So
I quite like it, to
foothills
be
of
honest.
the
I quite like to
Himalayas.
see different grounds and maybe slightly different surfaces and what have you. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see what each of those venues serves up, because obviously the last time England went there, it was in a bubble, wasn't it? You can't read too much into the last tour because England was staying in a hotel, not able to go out a lot, just basically hotel to ground inside a COVID bubble. Having a pretty miserable existence, I think. So
Should we go back to the one before that, which was 4-0?
Yeah. I mean,
on better tracks.
you don't have to remind me, DJ. I know how hard it is to go to India, and I think it's going to be any Englishman that's thinking Bazball's going to basically just roll through India and teach them a lesson. I think he's living in cloud cuckoo land, to be honest.
Yeah, so James has said it. This is the end of Bazball as we know it. But James, let's have a prediction on the series score. So let's start with that. What's your prediction?
I've been saying 5-0 India.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I hate saying it, and I really hope I'm wrong. But I think this India team will see off this England team. But I really hope I'm wrong. If not 5-0, maybe 4-1. Maybe England can have one of those games where Root gets a double ton and the bowlers back him up. But I fear for this England team over the next few weeks. I really do. And as I say, I really hope I'm wrong, but I am a little.
Let's go 4-1, the more optimistic of the predictions. Who's your top run scorer of the series
for England?
For both sides across teams.
Okay.
One name.
It'll be an Indian player who will top.
You're going to go with Rohit Sharma, aren't you?
I don't know if I am actually. I mean, I love. I really like Shubman Gill as a player, and I think him at the top of the order could have some success. But Rohit and Virat.
So he's going to bat 3 actually for India.
But Rohit and Virat won't be too far behind him.
Okay,
For England,
so you've gone with Gill.
For England, the favourite will be Joe Root. They probably. I mean, if they probably need a Ben Duckett or a Zach Crawley to have a really good series as well, because the openers will be key. If England lose a couple of wickets early and Joe Root's in there too early, then that'll be not a good thing for England. That's happened too much in the past. Zach Crawley, as I say, starting to learn Test cricket a little bit. Ben Duckett's had a really good kind of second life in Test cricket, so hopefully they can do well. But I think the wise money would be on Joe Root to be England's top scorer.
Yeah, fair call. Top wicket taker. And this is tough because you've got to pick between Ashwin and Jadeja. And there's Akshar as well.
I don't know, to be honest. Akshar interests me. If he definitely plays and plays all five, I mean, he was breaking records last time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
England either completely underestimated him or just could not pick him, play him. Um, as I say, they will be waking up in cold sweats about Akshar Patel. I like Jadeja, but Ashwin is just top quality. I think Ashwin will be the one that England fear most. So I'll take Ashwin to be the top wicket taker.
Okay, fair call. Man of the series?
Shubman Gill.
Okay. And what's the controversy going to be about this time?
Oh, it'll be. We will be talking DJ about pitches, all the way through. I think because
Okay.
England supporters. I mean, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think India will serve up some turners,
Yeah.
and I think as soon as the ball starts to go through the surface on day one, and Akshar Patel suddenly got 6 for 8 or something off his first in his first spell, the England social media will fire up and India will get defensive and vice versa. I mean, the one thing with Indian fans is that they don't like being told what to do they? Or how to be. And I totally get it from colonialism and all the rest of it, always being kind of like one of the smaller nations. Suddenly find yourself with loads of power and loads of money, sort of saying, well, now it's our turn now. Stop telling us what to do. It's our turn to kind of rule the roost. But yeah, just because England and Australia didn't always get it right doesn't mean that you should get it wrong as well. So hopefully, I hope there's not going to be controversy, but I've got a funny feeling there will be pitch chat all the way through this series.
Well, it's already started with England may not have cook this time, but they have their own chef, and so that's already raised a few.
I don't get that. I mean,
which is quite amusing.
I mean, England's entourage on tours is legendarily massive. They probably need 2 hotels soon if they keep employing people. But the 5-star hotels, I mean, always. We kind of have stories, don't we, from the past of Jack Russell, Geoffrey Boycott packing their suitcases full of baked beans and stuff because they don't want to eat the local food and make themselves ill, and Delhi belly and all this kind of stuff. But I think the 5-star hotels that they stay in India now are very, very nice places, and the food will be fine. But we'll see.
Well, I don't know whether it's to do with nutrition more than that sort of stuff. It might
You'd imagine
be. And
you'd
you
be able
can't
to-
blame it if it's for nutrition if you
You'd
want to.
imagine you'd be able to ring ahead to a hotel and say, "Can you take the deep fried Mars bars off the menu and give us some nice healthy food?"
You won't find deep fried Mars bars in India. You might find some bondas or like pakoras and stuff, but yeah. But I think that's about everything, James. Yeah, thank you so much for walking us through
just
the
before I go,
England side
DJ,
of things.
what was your score prediction? Tell me what you think.
So I was going to go with 3-1.
Okay.
And that's because I think there'll be a drawn test match somewhere. I think England will probably win one test match. And it's because of the nature of the pitches. I would like it to be 5-0. I think my top scorer is going to be Virat Kohli because I called him before the World Cup and I just love him. I mean, we love him to bits, right? And the top wicket taker, I think, is going to be Ashwin as well because of the number of left-handers as well that England will play.
Yeah.
And controversy, I don't know. There's going to be something to do with umpiring. There's got to be a DRS controversy somewhere. There's going to be something there's going to be some moral policing issue that's going to arise. If it's a disputed catch, like you saw in the World Test Championship final with Cameron Green and Shubman, it's some kind of Ashwin non-striker thing. There's going to be, I don't know. There's going to be a moral policing issue.
I mean,
that's going to divide the Twitterverse or the Xverse, I guess.
It wouldn't be an India-England series unless something like that happened, would it? I mean, Ashwin, it could, if you want it to really kick off, Ashwin to man-cad somebody in the first test would be great, wouldn't it?
Oh, it'll be handle the ball, obstructing the field. They ran overthrows recently when they got hit on the leg, the Afghanistan team. That didn't go down too well. It's within the rules. We'll see. Timed out. That's the other thing that might... Who knows what's going to happen?
Going to be interesting.
And I'm loving it. I mean, it's one of the biggest series in cricket, right? Like, you literally have 2 big series left in the game, which is India-Australia and India-England. It's sad in a way. and it comes along every 2 or 3 years, and it's great fun to watch. It does divide the world. It's going to be fun. It's good. There's good. My controversy is going to be law related. It has to be.
Yeah.
There'll be some interpretation which somebody doesn't like. There's going to be a catch taken on a boundary with the fielder with the foot off. It's going to be something, and it's all going to kick off.
You mentioned the World Test Championship earlier, and you talk about the future of Test cricket. This is a blue ribbon series. The Ashes is as well. India against Australia increasingly is, but that's the big three. And I think if the ICC has got any cojones at all, they need to really have a look at Test cricket and stop it being just dominated by three teams. There's a whole world out there of other teams that play Test cricket who need a little bit more funding, a little bit more love, a little bit more support when it comes to Test cricket. We've seen how good New Zealand have been with just 6 million sheep in their country.
More sheep than people.
Yeah. So I mean, if they can do it, then anybody can. And I think with just a little bit of support and a little bit of love and a little bit of foresight. The World Test Championship was brought in for a reason, to try and kind of rekindle some kind of competitive edge in Test cricket. I don't think it's done that. I saw Mark Butcher's comments recently sort of saying it's kind of almost done the opposite, really. I think only really India and Australia talk about the World Test Championship because you get through the first few months of the calendar, and nobody else. You start to get teams not being able to kind of compete in the final, and their eyes go elsewhere. I just want the world to love Test cricket and the ICC to show its love of Test cricket by if you're going to have a World Test Championship, make teams play each other. India never played Pakistan. If it's going to have to be a neutral venue, make it a neutral venue. But if you're going to have a genuine World Test Championship where everybody plays each other, make them play each other. The only time we ever get to see India against Pakistan is when they are conveniently drawn against each other in the ICC Global One Day tournaments, but conveniently draw them against each other in the World Test Championship. That would be another blue ribbon series. Play it in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Play it somewhere else, whatever. If you got safety concerns, but actually do it. Let's really kind of kick some energy into Test cricket.
Yeah, Kohli's never played a Test against Pakistan.
No. And Babur against Kohli, all the kind of subplots there. At the moment, I think India would batter Pakistan myself, but you never know what might be around the corner in 10 years' time. But Bangladesh. When was the last time England toured Bangladesh? It's not right. We need to get we give the likes of Afghanistan and Ireland Test status, and then they hardly ever play Test cricket. What's the point? Actually treat it seriously and get some tech. I saw somebody say, I know there's only 365 days in a year, and you can't play everything you want to play. Really, you can't. There's no perfect calendar that's going to please everybody. But maybe having what Rob Key suggested the other day of a 3-month window where nothing but Test cricket is played or something, so that you get the likes of Ireland taking on. On the Cricket Badger podcast, we've often said if India come to play England, hop across and play Ireland for a test, and give them some love and some money. If the West Indies go and play Australia, stop across in New Zealand and play a little bit. There's a big world, but it's getting increasingly smaller, and there's a lot of test nations that are actually fairly close to each other, where you can combine the tours and play one of the smaller nations at least once to give them a little bit of a pat on the head in a patronising manner, and maybe a little bit of cash. Let's give Test cricket some love.
Yeah, I think you're advocating world peace in the cricket world.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have.
Peace and love, man. That's what I say.
That's it. Well, James, it has been a pleasure hosting you on the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. We would love to have you back at some point during the series. Hopefully,
absolutely,
after
anytime.
5-0 prediction comes true.
Well, hopefully England win the first test, and I'm proved horribly wrong.
We'll definitely have you back then. We'll definitely have you back to tell us what they did right. But James, one more plug for the Cricket Badger podcast, and then
stick it into Google, Cricket Badger podcast. It's cricketbadgerpod.com is the website, at cricket_badger on Twitter. Or
and this is the Edges and Sledges. Oh yeah. and this is the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. We're at One Tip One Hand on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X. So come and say hello, give us a rating, give us a review, and we will be covering the India versus England series in full. So join us for all the fun. Thank you very much, and thanks for listening.